A closed fist, a grown woman's fist, slammed straight into the face of a 7-year-old boy strapped in his airplane seat. His nose cracked on impact. Blood exploded across the tray table, across his shirt, across the toy airplane he was holding in both hands. He screamed so loud, the entire cabin went dead silent. She did not flinch. She did not apologize. She stood over that bleeding child and said, "This is what happens when you do not comply." Her name was Carol Whitman. She had been a flight attendant for 22 years. 60 minutes after that punch, her name was permanently erased from the airline industry. But what happened inside those 60 minutes will shake you to your core. Before we get into this, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from so I can see just how far this story has traveled. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Malik Thompson woke up that morning and told his mother he could not sleep all night. He said it just like that, standing in the hallway of their home in Atlanta, still in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes with both hands. "Mom, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the clouds." Dr. Renee Thompson looked at her son and smiled. She had been up most of the night herself, finishing notes for a pediatric surgery conference she was scheduled to attend in Chicago. But hearing her boy talk about clouds like they were Christmas morning made every sleepless hour worth it. "What about the clouds?" she asked, crouching down to his height. "I want to see if they feel like cotton candy. You think the pilot would let me touch one?" Renee laughed and pulled him into a hug. "Maybe not touch one, but you will be right up close to them. I promise." This was Malik's third time on an airplane, but it was his first time being old enough to truly understand what flying meant. He had watched every documentary about planes his mother allowed. He had memorized the names of aircraft models the way other boys memorized baseball stats. Boeing 737, Airbus A320. He could spot them from the terminal window and call them out like he was reading a grocery list. Renee packed their carry-on bags carefully that morning. She placed Malik's favorite toy airplane in the front pocket of his small backpack, where he could reach it easily. She packed snacks, a coloring book, noise-canceling headphones for kids, and a neck pillow shaped like a dog. She thought of everything. Because that is what Renee did. She prepared. She planned. She controlled the things she could control. What she could not control was Carol Whitman. They arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 11:30 in the morning. The flight was scheduled for 1:15 in the afternoon. Renee liked arriving early. She always said airports rewarded patience and punished rushing. Malik held her hand through security. He waved at the TSA agent who checked their boarding passes. The agent smiled and said, "Have a good flight, little man." Malik grinned and said, "I am going to touch the clouds today." The agent laughed and gave him a thumbs up. They reached the gate with over an hour to spare. Malik pressed his face against the terminal window and watched the ground crew loading luggage onto their aircraft. "Mom, that is a 737-800. See the winglets? They curve up at the end." Renee sat beside him and nodded. "You are going to be a pilot one day, baby." "Not one day," Malik said very seriously. "When I grow up. That is different. One day sounds like maybe. When I grow up means for sure." That sentence would come back to haunt everyone who heard this story. Because what was about to happen to this boy had nothing to do with maybes. It had everything to do with certainty. The certainty of a woman who believed her authority meant more than a child's safety. Boarding began at 12:50. Renee and Malik were in Group 3. They walked down the jet bridge together, Malik holding his toy airplane out in front of him like it was leading the way. A few passengers smiled at him. One woman said, "Oh, he is adorable." Malik said, "Thank you, ma'am," without missing a step. Renee had raised him with manners sharp enough to cut glass. They found their seats. Row 14, seats A and B, window and middle. Renee let Malik have the window because she knew he would want to see the clouds. She helped him buckle his seatbelt, adjusted it twice to make sure it was snug, and handed him his toy airplane from his backpack. Malik held it up to the window. "Look, Mom, my plane is about to fly inside a plane." Renee kissed his forehead. "That is some serious inception, baby." Everything was fine. Everything was normal. The cabin was filling up, the overhead bins were closing, the pre-flight announcements were starting. And then Carol Whitman walked down the aisle. Carol was 51 years old. She had been a flight attendant for 22 years. She had worked for 3 different airlines and had been with this one for the last 9. Her personnel file contained 4 complaints in the past 3 years. 2 for rudeness, 1 for an aggressive tone with an elderly passenger, 1 for what was described as an unnecessary physical interaction with a teenage boy who had refused to put his bag under the seat. That last complaint was investigated, found inconclusive, and filed away. Nobody told Renee any of this. Nobody told any passenger any of this. Because the system was designed to protect employees, not the people sitting in those seats, Carol approached row 14 and stopped. "Ma'am, I need to see your boarding passes." Renee looked up. "Of course." She pulled both boarding passes from her phone and showed them. Carol glanced at the screen. Then she looked at Malik, then back at Renee. "These seats are assigned to a Dr. R. Thompson and 1 minor." "Yes," Renee said, "that is us. I am Dr. Thompson. This is my son Malik." Carol did not move. "This row is flagged for reassignment. I need you to move to row 27. Renee blinked. "Excuse me? We booked these seats 3 weeks ago. I specifically selected the window for my son." "Ma'am, I do not make the rules. This row has been reassigned. I need you to gather your things and move." Renee stayed calm. She always stayed calm. 20 years of surgery had taught her that panic was a luxury she could never afford. "Can you show me where this reassignment came from? I received no notification, no email, no update on the app." Carol's jaw tightened. "I do not need to show you anything. I am telling you to move. That is the procedure." Now let me stop right here and tell you something important. There was no reassignment. Investigators later confirmed that no system change had been made to row 14. No flag, no override, no note. Carol Whitman made it up. Right there, on the spot, standing in the aisle. And no one yet knows exactly why. But Renee did not know that in the moment. All she knew was that something felt wrong. "I would like to speak with the lead flight attendant, please," Renee said, keeping her voice steady. Carol's eyes narrowed. "I am the lead flight attendant on this aircraft." "Then I would like to speak with the captain." "The captain is busy." "Then I would like to see the documentation for this reassignment before I move." "Ma'am," Carol's voice dropped. It got tight, controlled. The kind of control that is not about calmness, but about pressure. "You need to move now, or I will have you removed from this flight." Malik tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, are we in trouble?" Renee put her hand on his knee. "No, baby, we are not in trouble. We are in our seats." She looked back at Carol. "We are not moving. These are our assigned seats. If there has been a change, I need to see it in writing." Carol stared at Renee for what passengers later described as an uncomfortably long time. Then she turned and walked toward the front of the cabin. For about 90 seconds, nothing happened. Renee whispered to Malik that everything was fine. She told him to look out the window and see if he could spot any cool planes. He pressed his face to the glass and pointed at a Delta 757 taxiing nearby. "Mom, that is a big one." Renee nodded and squeezed his hand. Then Carol came back. But she was different now. Her walk was faster. Her shoulders were pulled back. Her chin was up. She was carrying something in her energy that was not there before. Something that felt like a decision had already been made. She stopped at row 14 and spoke directly to Renee. "Ma'am, this is your last warning. You need to vacate these seats immediately. And I have told you I need to see the reassignment order. I am not going to ask you again, and I am not going to move without documentation." The cabin was watching now. The man in row 13 turned around. The woman across the aisle in 14C put down her magazine. A teenager 3 rows back pulled out his phone. He did not know it yet, but he was about to record something that would be seen by 40 million people. Carol leaned in closer. "You are causing a disturbance." "I am sitting in my seat," Renee said, "with my child, quietly." "How is that a disturbance?" "You are refusing a direct instruction from a crew member. That is a federal offense." "Refusing to give up a seat I paid for is not a federal offense, ma'am. I'm a doctor. I understand how rules work." That sentence changed something in Carol's face. Something shifted behind her eyes. Later, psychologists who reviewed the footage would call it a narcissistic injury. The moment someone in perceived authority feels publicly challenged and decides, consciously or not, that the other person must be punished. Carol straightened up. She looked at Malik. "Young man, you need to unbuckle your seatbelt and stand up." Malik looked at his mother. Renee shook her head slightly. "He is 7 years old," Renee said. "You do not address my child. You speak to me." "I am speaking to a passenger who is occupying a seat that needs to be vacated. He is not a passenger. He is a child, my child." Carol reached for Malik's seatbelt. Renee caught her hand. "Do not touch him." Carol yanked her arm away. Her face went red. Her breathing changed. Passengers later said they could see the veins in her neck pulsing. And then Malik did something that no one expected. He held up his toy airplane and said, "Ma'am, do you want to see my plane? It is a 737, just like this one." He was trying to make peace. A 7-year-old boy, in the middle of a confrontation he did not understand, tried to make a grown woman smile. He offered her his most prized possession. He offered kindness. Carol knocked the toy out of his hand. It hit the floor, and the wing snapped off. Malik's eyes filled with tears. He looked down at his broken airplane, and his bottom lip started to shake. "My plane," he whispered. Renee stood up. "You just broke my son's toy. I want your name and your badge number right now." Carol stepped back. "Sit down, ma'am. Your name and badge number, now." "I said sit down." Passengers started murmuring. The man in row 13 stood up. "Hey, leave them alone. They are not bothering anyone." Carol pointed at him. "Sir, sit down or you will be removed too." "For what?" he said. "For watching you bully a kid?" Carol's composure cracked. You could see it, like a dam with a fracture running through it, and the water behind it was not water. It was years of complaints ignored, behaviors unchecked, authority unchallenged. She turned back to Malik, and what she did next would end her career, change airline policy, and make a 7-year-old boy the most talked-about child in America. Malik was crying softly, reaching down for his broken toy airplane on the floor. His seatbelt was still buckled. His small body was bent forward, fingers stretching toward the pieces of his toy under the seat in front of him. Carol Whitman grabbed his shoulder and yanked him upright. Renee shouted, "Get your hands off my son!" And Carol, with a closed fist, struck Malik Thompson directly in the face. The sound was something passengers said they would never forget, a dull, wet crack that echoed through the cabin. Malik's head snapped back against the headrest. Blood erupted from his nose instantly, bright red, streaming down his chin, onto his shirt, onto the seat. For 2 full seconds, the entire aircraft went absolutely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Then Malik screamed. It was not a cry. It was a scream, the kind that comes from a place deeper than pain, the kind that comes from shock and terror and the complete collapse of everything a child believed about safety. Renee caught her son. She pulled him into her chest and pressed her hand over his nose to slow the bleeding. Blood soaked through her fingers and dripped onto her blouse. She could feel the cartilage shifting under her palm. She was a surgeon. She knew immediately. His nose was broken. "Oh my God," the woman in 14C screamed. "She hit that baby! She hit that child!" The cabin exploded. The man in row 13 lunged forward. "What is wrong with you? That is a kid!" A woman in row 16 started sobbing. "Somebody do something! Call someone!" The teenager who had been filming nearly dropped his phone, but kept recording. His hands were shaking so badly the footage was blurry for the first few seconds, but it captured everything. The blood, the screaming, Carol standing there with her fist still clenched. Carol did not apologize. Carol did not step back. Carol did not show a single second of remorse. Instead, she pointed at Renee and said, "This is what happens when you do not comply." Those words, those exact words, "This is what happens when you do not comply," they would be printed on protest signs within 24 hours. They would be quoted in congressional hearings within a week. They would become the defining sentence of a national reckoning about power, race, and the treatment of Black families in public spaces. But right now, in this moment, Renee did not care about any of that. She was holding her bleeding son and trying not to scream herself. "Somebody call the police," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I need a medic for my child, and I need this woman arrested." A male flight attendant named James rushed from the back of the cabin. He saw the blood. He saw Malik. He saw Carol. "Carol, what happened? What did you do?" "I handled a non-compliant passenger." "That is a child, Carol. That is a child." "He was interfering with my duties." James stared at her like she was speaking a language he did not understand. He grabbed the intercom and announced an emergency. He told the cockpit they needed to return to the gate immediately. The captain's voice came over the speakers within 30 seconds. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are returning to the gate due to an onboard situation. Please remain seated." Carol tried to walk back to the front galley. The man from row 13 blocked her path. "You are not going anywhere," he said. "Sir, move." "No, you just assaulted a child in front of 50 witnesses. You stay right here." Carol looked around. Every single face in that cabin was staring at her, some with horror, some with fury, some with phones recording. Not one face showed sympathy. Not one. Renee was rocking Malik gently, whispering into his ear, "You are okay, baby. Mommy is right here. You are okay. I have got you." But Malik was not okay. His nose was swelling rapidly. Blood was still dripping through his mother's fingers. His eyes were wide with a kind of fear that no child should ever know on an airplane, in a seat they paid for, holding a toy that someone who was supposed to keep them safe had broken, and then broken him, too. The plane taxied back to the gate. It took 11 minutes. Those 11 minutes felt like 11 hours. When the doors opened, airport police were the first on board. 2 officers walked down the aisle and found Carol standing near row 12, arms crossed, jaw set, showing nothing. "Ma'am, are you Carol Whitman?" "I am." "We are going to need you to come with us." "I was performing my duties." "Ma'am, we have multiple reports of an assault on a minor. You need to come with us now." Carol looked at Renee one more time, and Renee, with her son's blood on her hands and her son's broken toy on the floor, looked right back at her. She did not yell. She did not curse. She did not say a single word. She did not need to. Everything that needed to be said was in her eyes. The officers escorted Carol off the aircraft. As she walked through the jet bridge, she passed dozens of passengers who had already deplaned. One elderly woman shook her head and said quietly, "Shame on you." A father holding his own daughter pulled her closer as Carol walked by. A businessman in a suit muttered something under his breath the cameras did not catch, but everyone understood. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They assessed Malik on the spot. Broken nose, significant swelling, possible minor concussion from the impact against the headrest. They recommended an immediate hospital visit. Renee carried Malik off that airplane herself. She would not let anyone else hold him. She walked through the terminal with blood on her clothes, her son's face pressed into her neck, his small arms wrapped around her so tightly she could feel his heartbeat against her collarbone. A gate agent approached her. "Doctor Thompson, the airline would like to offer you a complimentary rebooking and a travel voucher for the inconvenience." Renee stopped walking. She turned to the agent slowly. "My son's nose is broken. He is 7 years old. And you are offering me a voucher?" The agent opened his mouth and closed it. He had nothing. "I do not want your voucher," Renee said. "I want your flight attendant charged. I want answers, and I want the world to see what happened on that plane." She did not know it yet, but the world was already watching. The teenager from row 15 had uploaded the video to social media before the paramedics even arrived. He posted it with one sentence: "Flight attendant just punched a little kid in the face. This is not okay." Within 10 minutes, it had 10,000 views. Within 20 minutes, it had 200,000. Within 30 minutes, the first news outlet picked it up, then the second, then the third. The video was shaky. It was raw, but it showed everything. Carol grabbing Malik's shoulder, Renee shouting, the punch, the blood, Malik's scream, Carol's words afterward. "This is what happens when you do not comply." And the internet did not just watch. The internet responded. Comments poured in by the thousands, then by the tens of thousands. People were outraged. People were heartbroken. People were demanding answers. The airline's social media pages were flooded with messages. Their customer service lines crashed. Their stock ticker started to move. And in a hospital room in Atlanta, a 7-year-old boy with a bandaged nose and tears still drying on his cheeks looked at his mother and asked a question that would become the most shared sentence in America that week. "Mom, what did I do wrong?" Renee held his face in both hands, careful not to touch his nose, and said, "Nothing, baby. You did nothing wrong. You were perfect. You hear me? You were absolutely perfect." But Malik shook his head slowly. Then why did she hurt me? And Renee, a woman who had spent her career finding answers, who had saved children's lives on operating tables, who had never once been at a loss for words in a medical emergency, could not answer her own son's question. Because there was no answer. There was no reason good enough, no explanation logical enough, no justification human enough to explain why a grown woman punched a 7-year-old boy in the face for sitting in his seat on an airplane. Renee pulled him close and held him. She held him and she cried. Not because she was weak, because she was a mother. And sometimes being a mother means absorbing a pain so deep that the only thing you can do is hold on and refuse to let go. Outside that hospital room, the world was on fire, and the clock was ticking. The video hit 1 million views at the 42-minute mark. Renee did not know that yet. She was sitting in an emergency room at Grady Memorial Hospital, holding a cold compress against her son's face while a nurse prepared x-ray paperwork. Malik had stopped crying, but he had not spoken a word since they left the airport. He just sat there, staring at the wall, breathing through his mouth because his nose was too swollen to let air pass through. Renee's phone had not stopped vibrating since they arrived. She had silenced it and shoved it in her purse. She did not care about her phone. She cared about the small boy sitting on that hospital bed who had not blinked in 2 minutes. "Malik, baby, look at me." He did not move. "Malik, please look at Mommy." Slowly, he turned his head. His eyes were glassy, not from tears anymore, from something worse, from a place inside a child where trust goes to die. "Does it still hurt?" she asked. He nodded. "The doctor is going to take a picture of your nose to make sure everything is okay inside. It will not hurt, I promise." "You promised the plane would be fun," he said. Renee felt that sentence land in her chest like a brick. She opened her mouth and nothing came out. Because he was right. She had promised. She had told him he would see the clouds. She had told him it would be the best trip. She had packed his snacks and his coloring book and his little toy airplane that was now in 2 pieces, somewhere on an aircraft being cleaned by a crew that had no idea what had happened in row 14. "I know, baby," she whispered. "I know I did. Is my plane broken forever?" "We will get you a new one." "I do not want a new one. I want that one. Daddy gave me that one." Renee closed her eyes. Malik's father, Derek Thompson, had passed away 3 years ago from a sudden cardiac event. He was 34. He had given Malik that toy airplane on his 4th birthday, the last birthday they celebrated together. It was not just a toy. It was the last physical thing Malik had from his father's hands, and Carol Whitman had knocked it to the floor and broken it like it was nothing. Renee pulled her son into her arms and held him so tight she could feel his ribs expanding with each breath. She made a decision in that moment. She was not going to let this go. Not for media attention, not for money, not for revenge. For him. For the boy who lost his father's airplane and his sense of safety on the same day. The ER doctor came in at the 51-minute mark. Dr. Alan Matsuda, a veteran emergency physician who had seen just about everything in 26 years of practice. "Dr. Thompson, I reviewed the initial assessment. We are going to get those x-rays now, but based on the physical exam, it is a displaced nasal fracture. There is significant soft tissue swelling. No signs of orbital involvement, which is good." Renee nodded. She already knew. She had palpated the fracture herself in the ambulance. She knew exactly what it was, exactly how bad it was, exactly how long it would take to heal. The medical part she could handle. The other part, the part where her son asked why a stranger hurt him, she had no treatment plan for that. "How did this happen?" Dr. Matsuda asked, looking at Malik gently. Renee's voice was flat. A flight attendant punched him in the face. Dr. Matsuda stopped writing. He looked up. "I am sorry. Did you say a flight attendant?" "Yes." "Punched him?" Closed fist, direct strike to the nose, in front of an entire cabin of witnesses. Dr. Matsuda put his pen down. In 26 years, he had treated children who fell off bikes, children who were in car accidents, children who came in with injuries that told stories no one wanted to hear. But a flight attendant assaulting a child on a commercial aircraft was something he had never encountered. "Is law enforcement involved?" he asked. "Airport police detained her at the scene. I filed a report before the ambulance brought us here." "Good. I am going to document everything thoroughly. Photographs, measurements, the full record. Whatever you need for what comes next, you will have it." "Thank you," Renee said, and then, quieter, "I am going to need all of it." While Malik was being x-rayed, Renee finally looked at her phone. She had 114 missed calls, 87 text messages, 41 voicemails, notifications from every social media platform she had, and 17 missed calls from numbers she did not recognize. She opened her text messages. The first one was from her sister, Denise. "Renee, call me immediately. You and Malik are all over the news. Every channel, every website. Are you okay? Is he okay? Please call me." The second was from her colleague at the hospital. "Renee, I just saw the video. I am in shock. Tell me what you need. Anything." The third was from a number she did not know. "Dr. Thompson, this is Vanessa Cole from CNN. We would like to speak with you about the incident on Flight 2741. Please contact us at your earliest convenience." Renee scrolled through message after message. NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, The New York Times, The Washington Post, local news, national news, people she had not spoken to in years, college roommates, distant cousins, her son's teacher, her pastor. She put the phone down and pressed both hands against her face. This was no longer a bad flight. This was a national event, and she was standing in the middle of it with blood still on her blouse and her son in an x-ray room. At the 1 hour mark exactly, Renee's phone rang again. This time she looked at the caller ID. It was attorney Marcus Reed. Marcus was not just any attorney. He was one of the most prominent civil rights lawyers in the Southeast. He had handled cases that made front pages. He had argued before appellate courts. And he was also Renee's late husband's college roommate. She answered. "Renee, I saw the video. I have been trying to reach you for 30 minutes. I know. I've been with Malik. His nose is broken, Marcus. I know. The whole country knows. That video has been viewed over 4 million times. 4 million? And climbing. Renee, listen to me carefully. The airline just released a statement 20 minutes ago. They called it an incident under review. That is corporate language for, we are going to stall until this blows over. It is not going to blow over. Not this time." Renee leaned against the wall. "What do I do?" "Right now, you do nothing public. You take care of your son. You document everything. Every medical record, every interaction, every word. I am already putting together a legal team. But I need you to understand something, Renee. This is bigger than a lawsuit. This is going to become a movement. And you need to decide right now how you want to move through it. I do not want a movement, Marcus. I want my son to be okay. I know, and we are going to make sure he is. But the world is watching. And how this plays out in the next 24 hours will determine whether anything actually changes or whether this becomes another story people forget in a week." Renee was quiet for a long time. She could hear the hospital intercom paging a doctor. She could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above her. She could hear her own heartbeat. "I will not let them forget," she said. "That is the Renee I know," Marcus said. "I am on my way to the hospital now. Do not talk to any media until I get there. Not one word." "Understood." She hung up and walked back to the x-ray room. Malik was sitting on the table, holding a sticker the technician had given him, a sticker of an airplane. He was staring at it with an expression that was too complicated for a 7-year-old face. "Mom, this airplane has both wings." Renee almost lost it right there. She bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted blood. She would not cry in front of him again. She would not. "That is a good airplane, baby. You hold on to that one." Back at the airport, things were unraveling fast. Carol Whitman was sitting in a windowless room in the airport police station. She had been there for 45 minutes. She had given her name, her employee number, and her version of events. Her version was notably different from what the video showed. According to Carol, the passengers in row 14 were hostile and non-compliant. She stated that the child lunged at her and that she reacted instinctively to protect herself. She described the contact as minimal and defensive. The officer interviewing her, Detective Sergeant Pamela Diaz, had already watched the video 3 times before Carol finished her statement. "Ms. Whitman, I have seen the footage, multiple angles. The child was seated and buckled the entire time. At no point did he lunge at you or anyone else." Carol's face did not change. The video does not show the full context. "The video shows you striking a 7-year-old child in the face with a closed fist. His nose is broken. I was doing my job." "Your job includes punching children?" Carol's attorney, a hastily called private lawyer named Glenn Forsyth, put his hand on her arm. "My client has given her statement. We have nothing further at this time." Detective Diaz closed her notebook. "Ms. Whitman, you are being charged with aggravated assault on a minor. You will be processed and arraigned. I strongly suggest you and your attorney take this very seriously." Carol looked at her attorney. For the first time since the incident, something flickered across her face. Not remorse, not guilt, fear. The kind of fear that comes when a person realizes the walls they built around themselves are made of paper. "I want to make a deal," she said. "That is not how this works, Ms. Whitman. Not today." Meanwhile, the airline's corporate headquarters in Dallas was in full crisis mode. The executive board had convened an emergency session within 30 minutes of the video going viral. 12 people sat around a conference table, and not one of them was talking about passenger satisfaction metrics or quarterly projections. They were watching the video on a screen mounted on the wall, and the room was silent. CEO David Aronson was the first to speak. How did this happen? The VP of Human Resources, Sandra Liu, pulled up Carol's personnel file. She has 4 prior complaints, 2 for rudeness to passengers, 1 for aggressive behavior with an elderly passenger, 1 for a physical interaction with a teenage passenger that was investigated and deemed inconclusive. "Inconclusive," Aronson said. "She had a prior physical complaint and she was still working flights?" The investigation did not find sufficient evidence to terminate. She was given a verbal warning. A verbal warning, and now she has broken a child's nose on camera, in front of 50 passengers, with a video that has been viewed how many times? The head of communications, Robert Navarro, looked at his phone. As of right now, 6.3 million views. Every major network has contacted us. CNN, MS, NBC, Fox, BBC. The NAACP has released a statement. 2 members of Congress have tweeted about it. The hashtag Justice for Malik is trending #1 nationally. Aronson put his head in his hands. He stayed like that for 10 seconds. When he looked up, his face was different. The corporate mask was gone. What was left was a man who understood that everything his airline had built was now sitting on the edge of a cliff. Terminate her. Immediately. Full termination. No severance. No benefits. Effective right now. Sandra Liu nodded. Done. I want her flight credentials revoked and reported to the FAA. We can file for emergency revocation within the hour. Do it. And I want her name submitted to the Industry Misconduct Registry. She never works on another aircraft for any airline, ever. Robert Navarro leaned forward. David, are you sure you want to move this fast? Legal might want to review the liability implications before we make a public statement. Robert, there is a 7-year-old boy in a hospital with a broken nose because one of our employees punched him in the face. I do not need legal to tell me what the right thing to do is. I need you to draft a statement, a real statement, not incident under review, a full acknowledgement, a full apology, and a full accounting of the actions we are taking. I want it released within the hour. Navarro nodded. I will have it in 15 minutes. Aronson looked around the table. Let me be clear with everyone in this room. This is not about public relations. This is not about stock price. This is not about brand management. A child was hurt on our watch by our employee. We failed, and we are going to own that failure completely and publicly, starting right now. The room was silent. At exactly 60 minutes after the video first went viral, the airline released a statement that would be read by tens of millions of people around the world. We are deeply horrified by the actions of former employee Carol Whitman aboard Flight 2741. Ms. Whitman has been terminated effective immediately. Her flight credentials have been revoked and reported to the FAA for federal review. Her name has been submitted to the Aviation Industry Misconduct Registry. We extend our sincerest and most profound apology to Malik Thompson and his mother, Dr. Renee Thompson. No child should ever be harmed, especially not by someone entrusted with passenger safety. We failed this family. We take full responsibility. We will cooperate fully with law enforcement, and we will implement immediate reforms to ensure nothing like this ever happens again. 60 minutes, that is all it took. 1 hour from the moment the world saw what Carol Whitman did to the moment her entire career vanished. 22 years of flying, gone, just like that. Not because the system worked perfectly, it did not. The system had 4 chances to stop Carol Whitman before this happened, and it failed every single time. It worked this time because a teenager with a phone recorded the truth. Because 4 million people watched it and refused to look away. Because a mother stood her ground and said, "Do not touch my son." Renee heard about the termination from Marcus Reed, who arrived at the hospital just as the statement dropped. He walked into Malik's room holding his phone. They fired her, he said. Full termination. Credentials revoked. Industry registry. She is done, Renee. Completely done. Renee looked at him. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She looked at Malik, who had fallen asleep on the hospital bed, with the airplane sticker still clutched in his small hand. Good, she said quietly, but that is not enough. I know, Marcus said. That is why I am here. I do not just want her punished, Marcus. I want the system that protected her for years to answer for what it did. 4 complaints. 4, and she was still in the air. She was still given authority over passengers, over children. How many other Carols are out there right now, working flights, carrying that same anger, waiting for the wrong passenger on the wrong day? Marcus sat down across from her. That is exactly the question we are going to force them to answer. And I want mandatory de-escalation training, real training, not a PowerPoint presentation that employees click through in 15 minutes. I want child protection protocols. I want transparent reporting. If a flight attendant has a complaint for aggressive behavior, that complaint should follow them. It should be visible. It should matter. We will make it matter. Renee looked at her son again. His chest was rising and falling with the slow rhythm of sleep. His bandaged nose made him breathe through his mouth, and every exhale was a soft whistle that filled the quiet room. He asked me what he did wrong, Renee said, barely above a whisper. He looked at me with those big brown eyes and asked what he did wrong. And I could not answer him, Marcus. I had nothing. Marcus leaned forward. You tell him the truth. You tell him he did nothing wrong. And you tell him that what happens next is going to make sure no other kid has to ask that same question. Renee wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He had a toy airplane. His father gave it to him. She knocked it out of his hands and broke it. That was the last thing Derek ever gave him. Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, lower, heavier. The voice of a man who was no longer just a lawyer, but a friend who understood exactly what had been taken. Then we make sure the world knows that too. Outside the hospital, news vans were already lining up. Reporters were doing live stand-ups in the parking lot. Cameras were pointed at the emergency entrance. Helicopters circled overhead. The story had grown beyond a viral video. It was now the lead story on every major news network in the country. And inside Room 7 of the Grady Memorial Emergency Department, a 7-year-old boy slept with a broken nose and a sticker of an airplane in his hand, dreaming about clouds he never got to touch. The clock had struck 60 minutes, and a career was over. But the real fight had only just begun. Marcus Reed did not sleep that night. He sat at the desk in his home office with 3 legal pads, 2 laptops, and a phone that would not stop ringing. By midnight, he had already assembled a team. 2 associate attorneys from his firm, a civil rights litigation specialist named Audrey Simmons, who had won a landmark case against a major hotel chain 2 years prior, and a media strategist named Terrence Grant, who had guided families through national firestorms before and understood something most people did not. The court of law and the court of public opinion operated on 2 completely different clocks, and you had to win in both. At 6:15 the next morning, Marcus called Renee. She answered on the first ring. She had not slept either. "How is he?" Marcus asked. He woke up twice, screaming, nightmares. He kept saying she was coming back. He kept telling me to lock the door. Renee's voice cracked on the last word, but she pulled it back. I held him until he fell asleep again. He is still sleeping now. "And you?" "I am standing in my kitchen, covered in my son's blood from yesterday, because I never changed my clothes, Marcus. How do you think I am?" "I think you are the strongest person I know, and I think today is going to be one of the hardest days of your life." "Harder than yesterday?" "Different. Yesterday was the trauma. Today is the war." Renee gripped the phone tighter. "Then tell me the battle plan." Marcus laid it out. The airline's public apology was a start, but it was a corporate reflex, not accountability. Carol Whitman had been charged with aggravated assault on a minor, but her arraignment was not until Thursday. The media was camped outside Grady Memorial and outside Renee's home. Requests for interviews had come in from every major outlet in the country, and several international ones. And something else had happened overnight that Marcus needed Renee to hear before she heard it from anyone else. Carol Whitman did a jailhouse interview. Renee went still. She what? Her attorney arranged it. She spoke to a local reporter last night. 30-minute interview. It aired at 11 p.m., and it has already been picked up nationally. What did she say? Marcus paused. He chose his next words carefully because he knew what they would do. She said she was the victim. The silence on the line lasted 4 full seconds. She said, "What?" "She told the reporter that you were aggressive from the moment she approached your row. She said you grabbed her arm and threatened her. She said Malik was out of control and unbuckled and moving around the cabin. She said she felt physically threatened and responded in self-defense. She cried during the interview, Renee. She actually cried and said her life was being destroyed over a misunderstanding." Renee set her phone down on the counter. She pressed both palms flat against the surface and stared at the wall. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from a kind of rage that is so pure it becomes quiet, the kind that does not scream, the kind that builds. She picked the phone back up. Malik was buckled in his seat the entire time. He never unbuckled. He never stood up. He never moved. He was holding a toy airplane that she knocked out of his hands. He was reaching for it when she grabbed him and punched him. 50 people saw it. Multiple cameras recorded it. And she is saying she was the victim? Yes. And people believe her? Some do. That is the problem. Her interview is being shared in certain circles. There are already people online defending her, saying the video was taken out of context, saying we do not know the full story. It is a playbook, Renee. Deny, deflect, reverse the roles, make the aggressor the victim, make the victim the aggressor. It is as old as this country. Renee closed her eyes. She breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth. She had performed emergency surgeries on children with their organs failing. She had delivered death notifications to parents in hospital waiting rooms. She had operated for 11 straight hours on a toddler with a congenital heart defect and saved that child's life. She could handle this. She had to handle this, because her son could not handle it for himself. "What do we do?" she asked. "We tell the truth, loudly, clearly, and first." At 9 a.m., Marcus held a press conference outside his law office. The media turnout was enormous. Over 40 cameras. Reporters from networks Renee had only ever watched from her living room couch. Marcus stood at the microphone with Audrey Simmons beside him and laid out the facts. He stated that Malik Thompson was a 7-year-old boy seated in his assigned seat with his seatbelt fastened. He stated that no reassignment order existed for row 14 and that Carol Whitman fabricated the claim on the spot. He stated that Malik never moved, never lunged, never posed any threat whatsoever. He stated that Carol Whitman struck the child with a closed fist, breaking his nose and causing a displaced nasal fracture. He stated that Carol Whitman's personnel file contained 4 prior complaints, including a previous allegation of physical contact with a minor passenger. Then he said something that changed the trajectory of the entire case. Last night, Ms. Whitman went on television and called herself the victim. She claimed that a 7-year-old child, 72 pounds, buckled into his seat holding a toy airplane, was a physical threat to a grown woman. Let me show you something. He held up a photograph. It was Malik in his hospital bed, nose bandaged, eyes swollen, a sticker of an airplane in his hand. This is her victim. This is who she felt threatened by. This is who she punched in the face. His name is Malik. He is 7 years old. He loves airplanes. The toy she knocked out of his hands and broke was the last gift his late father ever gave him. His father passed away 3 years ago. That toy airplane cannot be replaced. His broken nose will heal. But what was taken from this child on that aircraft goes far beyond a physical injury. Every camera in that crowd was clicking. Every reporter was writing. The photograph of Malik in that hospital bed was on the front page of every major news outlet by noon. But the morning brought something else that no one expected. At 10:30 a.m., a woman named Patricia Holden called Marcus Reed's office. She said she needed to speak with him urgently about Carol Whitman. She said she was a former passenger on a flight Carol had worked 6 years earlier. Marcus took the call himself. "Mr. Reed, my name is Patricia Holden. I live in Memphis. I saw the video of what happened to that little boy, and I have been sick to my stomach since yesterday, because the same thing nearly happened to my daughter." Marcus grabbed a legal pad. "Tell me everything." 6 years ago, my daughter was 9. We were flying from Memphis to Dallas. Carol Whitman was the flight attendant. My daughter accidentally spilled a cup of orange juice on the armrest. It was an accident. She was a child. Carol came over and grabbed my daughter by the wrist so hard it left a bruise. She twisted her arm and told her to clean it up. My daughter was crying. I stood up and told Carol to let go of my child. Carol shoved me back into my seat. "Did you report it?" "I reported it to the airline. I filed a formal complaint. A week later, I got a letter saying the matter had been reviewed and addressed internally. That was it. No follow-up, no apology, nothing." "Do you still have that letter?" "I kept everything, Mr. Reed. The letter, the photographs of the bruise on my daughter's wrist, the boarding passes. I kept it all because I knew in my gut that woman would hurt someone else. And she did. She hurt that little boy. And I have been carrying this guilt for 6 years that maybe if I had pushed harder, maybe if I had gone to the media, that boy would still have his toy airplane and his face would not be broken." Marcus put his pen down. "Mrs. Holden, this is not your fault. The system failed you, just like it failed Malik. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to come to Atlanta. I will be on the next flight. And Mrs. Holden, bring everything." By noon on the second day, the story had evolved from a viral video into something much larger. Patricia Holden's account opened a door that the airline desperately wanted to keep closed. If there was one prior victim who came forward, there could be more. And there were. By 2 p.m., Marcus Reed's office had received 11 additional calls from former passengers who claimed they had experienced aggressive or inappropriate behavior from Carol Whitman over the past decade. 11. 4 of them involved children. 3 of them had filed formal complaints with the airline. All 3 received the same form letter. Matter reviewed, addressed internally, case closed. Marcus called Renee at 2:30. "Renee, we have 12 people. 12 former passengers who say Carol did similar things to them or their families. 4 involved children. The airline knew about at least 3 of them because formal complaints were filed. They did nothing. Renee was sitting on the floor of Malik's bedroom. He was napping again. He had been napping a lot. The doctor said it was normal after trauma. The body shuts down to heal. But Renee knew it was more than that. He was hiding. Sleep was the only place where no one could grab him or hit him or break his things. 12 people, Renee repeated. 12 that we know of. In 2 days. This is just the beginning. They knew Marcus. They knew she was dangerous, and they kept putting her on planes. And that is exactly what we are going to prove. At 3 p.m., something happened that shifted the entire national conversation. Congresswoman Angela Davis Park from Georgia's 5th District held a press briefing on Capitol Hill. She had seen the video. She had read the reports. She had spoken with her colleagues. And she stood in front of the cameras and said words that would be quoted for months. What happened to Malik Thompson is not an isolated incident. It is a systemic failure. When an airline has 4 documented complaints against an employee for aggressive behavior, including a complaint involving physical contact with a minor, and that employee is still working flights, that is not a personnel issue. That is a policy catastrophe. I am introducing legislation this week that will require mandatory de-escalation training for all airline personnel, the creation of a transparent federal complaint tracking system, and child passenger protection protocols on every domestic and international flight. We called these flight attendants safety professionals. It is time we held them to that standard. The announcement hit like a thunderbolt. Within an hour, 3 additional members of Congress publicly supported the proposed legislation. The FAA issued a statement confirming they were conducting an emergency review of industry complaint procedures. The Airline Workers Union released a carefully worded statement that distanced itself from Carol Whitman while acknowledging the need for improved training standards. And at 4 p.m., the airline's CEO, David Aronson, did something unprecedented. He called Renee Thompson directly. Renee was in her living room when the call came. Marcus was with her. He put the call on speaker. Dr. Thompson, this is David Aronson. I am the CEO of the airline. I want you to hear this from me directly, not from a press release, not from an attorney, not from a spokesperson. I am sorry. What happened to your son is inexcusable. I have 2 children of my own. I watched that video and I wept. I wept because that should never have happened, and because our company had warnings about this employee that were not acted upon adequately. I am not calling to offer you money or settlements or first-class upgrades. I am calling to tell you that I want to work with you. I want to hear what you believe needs to change, and I want to implement those changes. Not because we are being pressured, because it is right. The room was quiet. Renee looked at Marcus. He gave a slight nod. Mr. Aronson, Renee said, I appreciate this call, but I need you to understand something. My son asked me what he did wrong. He looked at me and asked what he did wrong. He is 7. He did nothing wrong. He sat in his seat. He held his toy. He tried to show your employee his little airplane, and she knocked it out of his hands, and then she broke his face. That toy was the last thing his father gave him before he died. So when you tell me you want to work with me, I need you to understand the depth of what was taken from my child. It was not just a broken nose. It was his sense of safety. It was his trust in adults. It was the last piece of his father he could hold in his hands. Aronson was silent for several seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was thick. I understand, Dr. Thompson, and I give you my word that I will not treat this as a public relations exercise. Whatever reforms you and your legal team propose, I will personally review and champion within this company. You have my direct number. Use it anytime. Renee thanked him, and the call ended. She sat back and exhaled for what felt like the first time in 36 hours. Do you believe him? She asked Marcus. I believe he is scared. Whether that fear turns into genuine change depends on how hard we push. Then we push until they feel it. At 6 p.m. on the second day, Renee made a decision that Marcus had been gently suggesting since that morning. She agreed to release a public statement. Not an interview, not a press conference, a video. recorded in Malik's hospital room before they were discharged. Just her, her son, and a phone. Marcus helped her prepare, but Renee did not want to be coached. She wanted to speak from the only place that mattered, from a mother's heart. The video was 2 minutes and 14 seconds long. Renee sat beside Malik on the hospital bed. He was awake. His nose was bandaged. He was holding the airplane sticker the X-ray technician had given him. Renee looked into the camera and spoke. "My name is Dr. Renee Thompson. This is my son, Malik. He is 7 years old. Yesterday, he was punched in the face by a flight attendant on a commercial airplane. His nose is broken. He has nightmares. He's afraid to leave his room. He keeps asking me what he did wrong. I'm releasing this video because I want every parent, every grandparent, every person who has ever loved a child to see what happened and to understand that this cannot continue. My son is not a talking point. He is not a hashtag. He is a little boy who loves airplanes and who tried to show a stranger his favorite toy. What was done to him was wrong. And what allowed it to happen? The system that ignored 4 complaints, the culture that gives authority without accountability. That was wrong too. I am not asking for sympathy. I am asking for change. Real change, so that no other child has to sit in a hospital bed and ask their mother what they did wrong. Then Malik looked at the camera. No one told him to. No one asked him to speak. He just looked up with those big brown eyes above that white bandage and said 7 words. "I just wanted to see the clouds." Marcus released the video through his firm's social media accounts at 7 p.m. By 8 p.m., it had been viewed 22 million times. By 9 p.m., every major network had aired it. By 10 p.m., "I just wanted to see the clouds" was the most trending phrase on every social media platform in the United States. People were not just angry anymore. They were grieving. They were grieving for a little boy who got on an airplane with a toy and a dream and walked off with a broken nose and a broken heart. They were grieving because every parent saw their own child in that hospital bed. Every grandparent saw their grandchild. Every teacher saw their student. Every human being with a shred of empathy saw a kid who did nothing wrong and got punished for existing. And in a county jail holding cell, Carol Whitman saw the video too. A guard showed it to her on his personal phone. Not out of cruelty, out of something else. Maybe he wanted her to see what she had done. Maybe he wanted her to understand the weight of it. Carol watched the entire 2 minutes and 14 seconds. She watched Malik's bandaged face. She heard Renee's words. She saw the sticker in his hand. And when Malik said, "I just wanted to see the clouds," Carol Whitman turned away from the screen and faced the wall. The guard waited for a reaction. An apology, a tear, something. Carol said nothing. She just stared at the wall. And the guard walked away, shaking his head, wondering how a person could watch that and feel nothing. Or maybe she did feel something. Maybe what she felt was so heavy and so dark and so indefensible that the only thing she could do was turn away and pretend the wall was more interesting than the ruin she had made. At 11 p.m. on the second night, Malik woke up screaming again. He called for his mother. Renee ran to his room and found him sitting upright, drenched in sweat, holding his hands in front of his face like he was blocking a blow. "She is here, Mom. She is on the plane. She is going to hit me again." Renee pulled him into her arms. "No, baby. No one is here. You are home. You are safe. Mommy is here." "I do not want to fly anymore, Mom. I do not want to fly. Please do not make me fly." Those words crushed something inside Renee that she did not know could be crushed. Her son, who had memorized every aircraft model, who had dreamed of being a pilot since he could talk, who had said, "When I grow up," like it was a certainty and not a maybe, was now terrified of the thing he loved most in the world. Carol Whitman did not just break his nose. She broke his dream. And Renee, holding her trembling son in the dark, made a silent promise that before this was over, she would make sure the world understood exactly what was taken from this child. Not just bone and cartilage, not just a toy airplane, but the wonder, the joy, the innocent belief that the sky was a place where beautiful things happened. Malik fell back asleep in her arms at 11:47 p.m. Renee did not move. She sat in that bed, holding him, staring at the ceiling, listening to his broken nose whistle with every breath. Somewhere in that darkness, she stopped being just a mother with a hurt child. She became something the airline, the industry, and every person who ever looked the other way was not prepared for. She became a force. 3 days after the incident, Carol Whitman posted bail. Her attorney, Glenn Forsyth, arranged the bond at $75,000. She walked out of the Fulton County Jail at 8:14 in the morning, wearing the same clothes she had been arrested in. There were cameras waiting, 14 of them. She kept her head down and said nothing. Forsyth shielded her with his body and guided her into a black SUV parked at the curb. Before the door closed, one reporter shouted a question that every camera caught. "Carol, do you have anything to say to Malik?" Carol did not look up. She did not flinch. She pulled the door shut, and the SUV drove away. But inside that vehicle, something was happening that the cameras could not see. Forsyth turned to Carol and spoke in a tone he had never used with a client before. "We need to talk. Right now." "Not now, Glenn. I just want to go home." "You do not have a home to go to, Carol. Your landlord filed an eviction notice this morning. Your neighbors started a petition. There are people outside your apartment building with signs." Carol stared at him. "They cannot evict me. I have a lease." "They are citing a morality clause in your lease agreement, and the fact that your presence is creating a safety disturbance for other tenants. Whether it holds up legally is another matter, but right now, you cannot go back there." "Then where am I supposed to go?" "I booked you a room at a motel outside the city, under a different name. You need to stay off the radar for the next 72 hours minimum." Carol turned to the window. "This is insane. I defended myself on that plane. That woman was aggressive. That child was out of control. And now I am homeless? I am hiding in a motel? I gave that airline 22 years of my life, Glenn. 22 years. Forsyth looked at her for a long moment. He had been a defense attorney for 18 years. He had represented people accused of terrible things. He had learned how to separate his personal feelings from his professional obligations. But sitting in that SUV, listening to Carol Whitman describe punching a 7-year-old boy in the face as self-defense, he felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Doubt. Not about the case, about the client. "Carol, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Not as a client talking to her lawyer, as a human being talking to another human being." "What?" "Did you watch the video?" "Which video?" "The one of the boy in the hospital. The one where he says he just wanted to see the clouds." Carol did not answer. "Carol?" "Yes, I watched it." "And?" "And what? The kid is fine. Broken noses heal. I had mine broken twice in my 20s, and I survived." Forsyth felt something cold settle in his chest. He turned away from her and faced the windshield. "I will get you to the motel. We have a court date Thursday. Be ready." On that same morning, Renee Thompson was sitting in Marcus Reed's conference room with Audrey Simmons, Terrence Grant, and a woman who had flown in from Memphis the night before, Patricia Holden. The first person to come forward with a prior complaint against Carol Whitman. Patricia was 53 years old. She was a retired school teacher. She wore a blue blouse and carried a manila folder that she had kept in her filing cabinet for 6 years, waiting for a day she hoped would never come, but always feared would. She placed the folder on the table and opened it. "This is the complaint I filed with the airline. This is the letter they sent back. This is the photograph of the bruise on my daughter's wrist. And this is the boarding pass from that flight." Marcus picked up the photograph. A 9-year-old girl's wrist with 4 distinct finger-shaped bruises wrapped around it like a violet bracelet. He passed it to Audrey. Audrey stared at it, and her jaw tightened. "How is your daughter now?" Renee asked. It was the first thing she said since Patricia sat down. Not a legal question, a mother's question. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "She is 15 now. She has not been on an airplane since. She will not go near an airport. Last year, her school organized a class trip to Washington, D.C. They were supposed to fly. My daughter refused. She took a 12-hour bus ride by herself rather than get on a plane. She told me she still remembers that woman's hand on her wrist. She told me she can still feel the squeeze." Renee reached across the table and took Patricia's hand. They held on to each other for a long moment. 2 mothers, 2 children, the same woman, 6 years apart. "I am so sorry," Renee said. "Do not be sorry. Be loud. Be so loud they cannot ignore this ever again." Marcus nodded. "That is exactly the plan. Patricia, I need your permission to include your daughter's case in our filing. We are preparing a civil suit not just on behalf of Malik, but as a pattern of conduct case against the airline. Your complaint, the 3 other formal complaints in the file, and the additional witnesses who have come forward all establish that the airline had knowledge of Carol Whitman's behavior and failed to act. You have my permission. My daughter's, too. I called her last night and told her about Malik. She cried for an hour. Then she said, and these are her exact words, "Mom, tell them everything. Tell them so she cannot do this to anyone else." By Thursday morning, the day of Carol Whitman's arraignment, Marcus Reed had collected 19 witness statements from former passengers. 19 people who had experienced or witnessed aggressive behavior from Carol over a 12-year span. 7 of those incidents involved children. 5 had filed formal complaints. Every single complaint was handled the same way: reviewed internally, addressed, case closed. No follow-up, no consequences, no accountability. The airline's internal system had not just failed, it had been designed to fail. It was built to absorb complaints and dissolve them, to protect the institution and ignore the people it served. Marcus presented this evidence to Audrey Simmons, who looked at the stack of documents and said 3 words that changed the legal strategy entirely. "This is negligence." "Gross negligence," Marcus corrected. "Worse than that. This is deliberate indifference. They knew. They had documentation. They had photographs. They had a woman who left bruises on a 9-year-old girl's wrist, and they put her back on a plane the next week. This goes beyond Carol Whitman. This is institutional liability." Marcus agreed. The civil suit would name Carol Whitman individually for assault and battery, but it would also name the airline for gross negligence, deliberate indifference, and failure to protect passengers from a known threat. The damages being sought were not disclosed publicly, but insiders familiar with the filing later described them as staggering. The arraignment was held at the Fulton County Courthouse at 9 a.m. Thursday. The courtroom was packed. Media filled every available seat. Members of the public who could not get inside stood on the courthouse steps. Renee was not there. Marcus had advised her to stay home with Malik. This hearing was procedural. The real battles would come later. Carol Whitman stood before Judge Eleanor Marsh in a gray suit her attorney had purchased for her because all of her own clothes were still in the apartment she could not return to. She stood straight. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Her face showed nothing. Judge Marsh read the charges: aggravated assault on a minor, reckless endangerment, assault causing bodily harm to a child under 10. How does the defendant plead? Forsyth stepped forward. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. It took 90 seconds for the room to settle. "Not guilty?" a woman in the gallery said loud enough for everyone to hear. "She did it on camera." Judge Marsh pointed her gavel. "One more outburst and I will clear this courtroom." The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Monica Chen, requested that Carol's bail be revoked and that she be remanded into custody pending trial. She argued that Carol was a flight risk, that the severity of the charge warranted detention, and that the public interest demanded it. Forsyth argued that Carol had no prior criminal record, that she had surrendered her passport, and that she posed no danger to the community. Judge Marsh denied the prosecution's request, but doubled Carol's bail to $150,000 and imposed strict conditions: electronic monitoring, no contact with the Thompson family, no contact with any witnesses, no air travel, surrender of all travel documents. Carol posted the new bail by noon. This time, Forsyth took her out through a back entrance. But the arraignment was not the biggest news of the day. At 2 p.m., the FAA held a press conference in Washington. Administrator Janet Solano stepped to the podium with the weight of an entire industry behind her. Following an emergency review initiated in response to the events on Flight 2741, the Federal Aviation Administration is announcing 3 immediate actions. First, we are mandating comprehensive de-escalation training for all cabin crew personnel on all domestic carriers, effective within 90 days. Second, we are establishing a federal passenger complaint tracking system that will create a transparent, cross-carrier database of crew misconduct reports. Complaints will no longer disappear into individual airline review processes. They will be tracked, monitored, and actionable at the federal level. Third, we are implementing child passenger protection protocols that will establish specific guidelines for interactions between crew members and minor passengers. These protocols will include mandatory intervention procedures, witness documentation requirements, and zero-tolerance policies for physical contact with minors outside of demonstrated safety emergencies. She paused and looked directly into the cameras. What happened to Malik Thompson should never have happened. But what allowed it to happen, the gaps in our oversight, the failure of internal systems, the absence of cross-carrier accountability, those are failures we can and will correct. This is not the end of our review. This is the beginning. Marcus called Renee immediately after the announcement. "Did you hear?" "I watched it live. Marcus, they did it. They actually did it." "You did it, Renee. You and Malik. Every single one of those reforms exists because a 7-year-old boy loved airplanes and his mother refused to be silent." Renee was sitting on the couch. Malik was on the floor beside her, drawing. He had been drawing airplanes all morning. Not the detailed, joyful drawings he used to make. These were different, smaller, with tiny figures inside them. Renee had noticed that in every drawing there was one figure sitting alone, away from all the others. "Marcus, there is something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "Malik's therapist called this morning. She recommended intensive trauma therapy. She said he is showing signs of acute stress disorder. He has nightmares every night. He flinches when strangers get close to him. He will not leave the house. Yesterday, I turned on the television and a commercial for the airline came on. He covered his eyes and ran to his room." Marcus was quiet. "He is 7 years old, Marcus. He cannot even watch a commercial." "We are going to get him the best care in the country, Renee. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes." "It is not about the cost. It is about the damage." His therapist said something that I have not been able to stop thinking about. She said that when a child experiences violence from an authority figure in a place that is supposed to be safe, it does not just create fear of that person. It creates fear of the entire concept of safety. The child stops believing that any authority figure can be trusted. Any space can be safe. The world itself becomes threatening. And that is exactly what the jury needs to hear. I am not telling you this for the jury, Marcus. I am telling you this because my son drew an airplane today, and the little boy inside it was sitting in the back, all alone, with no one next to him. He has never drawn himself alone before. Ever. Marcus did not speak for several seconds. When he did, his voice was different, stripped of the legal sharpness. Just a man who knew a child who was hurting. "Renee, we are going to make this right. Not just legally, not just politically. For him, for Malik. I promise you." That evening, something unexpected happened. Something that no one in Marcus's legal team or the airline's crisis management team or the FAA or Congress had anticipated. Malik Thompson received a letter. It came in a plain white envelope addressed to him by name. There was no return address. It was hand-delivered to Renee's mailbox, not mailed through the post. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. "Dear Malik, I am Captain Robert Yates. I've been a pilot for 31 years. I fly the 737 that you love so much. I saw what happened to you, and I am so sorry. No one should ever be hurt on an airplane. Airplanes are for dreams. I want you to know that the sky is still yours. The clouds are still waiting for you. And when you are ready, I would be honored to show you the cockpit of my 737 and let you sit in the captain's seat. The sky belongs to boys like you, Malik. Do not ever let anyone take that away. Captain Yates." Renee read the letter 3 times before she showed it to Malik. She needed to make sure it was safe. She needed to make sure it was real. She handed it to Malik after dinner. He read it slowly, sounding out some of the bigger words. When he got to the part about sitting in the captain's seat, He stopped. "Mom, is this real?" "It is real, baby." "A real pilot wrote this? To me?" "A real pilot. A 737 pilot. Just like the ones you love." Malik read the letter again. And then something happened that Renee had not seen since before the flight. He smiled. A small smile. Barely there, but real. The first real smile in 4 days. "Mom, he said the sky is still mine." He did. "Do you think the clouds are really still waiting?" Renee knelt down in front of him. She took both of his hands in hers. "I know they are, baby. I know they are." Malik held the letter against his chest and closed his eyes. He held it the same way he used to hold his toy airplane, with both hands, like it was the most important thing in the world. That night, for the first time since the incident, Malik did not scream in his sleep. He did not wake up drenched in sweat. He did not call for his mother in the dark. He slept with Captain Yates's letter under his pillow. And in the morning, Renee found him in the hallway, holding the letter, looking out the window at the sky. "Mom, when can we go see the captain?" Renee felt her heart crack open and light pour through. Not the blinding light of the camera flashes or the harsh light of hospital rooms. The soft, warm light that only comes when a child decides to hope again. Soon, baby, very soon. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. "Marcus, I know what I want to do with the airline's offer. They have not made a formal offer yet. They will, and when they do, I do not want just money. I do not want just policy changes. I want them to fund a program for children who have been traumatized on flights, therapy, support. And I want a pilot named Captain Robert Yates to be part of it. He wrote my son a letter, and Malik smiled for the first time in 4 days." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is the most powerful thing you could ask for, and they will not be able to say no. Not to this. Not to Malik." Meanwhile, across the city in a motel room with the curtains drawn and the television muted, Carol Whitman sat on the edge of the bed staring at her phone. She had been reading the news. All of it. The FAA announcement, the congressional legislation, the 19 witnesses, Patricia Holden's daughter, the viral video of Malik in the hospital, 22 million views. The letter from Captain Yates that someone had photographed and shared online. The hashtag that would not die. Justice for Malik. Her phone rang. It was her sister, the only family member who had not stopped taking her calls. "Carol, have you seen a therapist yet?" "I do not need a therapist. You are facing felony charges. You have lost your job. You have lost your home. You are hiding in a motel. And you still think you do not need help? I need people to hear my side of the story. Carol, there is a video. There is no other side. I love you. You are my sister. But I watched that video and I saw you hit a little boy in the face. I saw it. The whole world saw it. And until you are able to say that out loud, until you can say, I did that, and it was wrong, nothing is going to get better for you." Carol's hand tightened around the phone. "You sound just like them. I sound like someone who wants you to survive this, because right now, you are not surviving. You are drowning. And the hand you keep reaching for is dragging you deeper." The line went silent for 10 seconds. "He was just a kid, Carol. He was 7. He had a toy, and you hit him." Carol hung up. She set the phone face down on the nightstand. She sat there in the dark motel room, and she did not move for a very long time. And somewhere across that same city, a 7-year-old boy was standing at a window, holding a pilot's letter against his heart, looking at the clouds, and whispering something his mother could barely hear. "I am going to fly again. I am going to fly." 2 weeks passed, 14 days that felt like 14 months for everyone involved. The bruising around Malik's nose had faded from dark purple to a sickly yellow. The swelling had gone down enough for him to breathe through his nose again, though Renee noticed he still breathed through his mouth when he was anxious. His therapist, Dr. Lillian Monroe, had been seeing him 3 times a week. She told Renee that Malik was making progress, but that progress with childhood trauma was not a straight line. It was a spiral. Some days he moved forward. Some days, he circled back. The key was to let him lead. Malik had started drawing airplanes again, bigger ones now, with more detail. And in his newest drawings, the little figure inside the plane was no longer sitting alone in the back. He was sitting in the front, in the cockpit. Captain Robert Yates had written back. After Renee's team reached out through Marcus, the captain agreed to meet Malik at a private hangar at Hartsfield-Jackson. No media, no cameras, just a pilot and a boy and a 737 sitting quietly on the tarmac. That meeting happened on a Tuesday morning, 15 days after the incident. Renee drove Malik to the airport, and she could feel his body tense the moment they pulled into the airport complex. His hands gripped the seatbelt. His breathing quickened. His eyes darted to every sign, every terminal, every jet bridge visible from the road. "Mom, I do not want to go inside the airport." "We are not going inside the airport, baby. We are going to a special place. Just for us. No lines, no crowds, no terminals. Promise?" "Promise." She drove to a private entrance on the south side of the field. A security guard checked their names and waved them through. They parked beside a small building, and Renee could see through the chain-link fence the tail of a 737 sitting on the concrete. Malik saw it too. His grip on the seatbelt loosened. His eyes went wide. Not with fear, with something older than fear. Something that had been there first. Wonder. "Mom, that is a 737-800. Look at the winglets." Renee smiled. It was the first time he had identified a plane by model since the incident. The first time his voice carried that specific excitement that only Malik had when he talked about aircraft. "You want to go see it?" He nodded, slowly at first, then faster. They walked through the gate and onto the tarmac, and there, standing at the bottom of the boarding stairs, was Captain Robert Yates. He was 61 years old, silver hair, tall, wearing his full pilot uniform with the 4 gold stripes on his shoulders. He had a kind face and steady eyes, and he stood like a man who had landed planes through thunderstorms and never once lost his composure. He crouched down to Malik's height. "You must be Malik. I am Captain Yates. I have been waiting to meet you." Malik held out his hand. "Nice to meet you, Captain. Is that your 737? Yates shook his hand gently. "It is today. Want to see the inside?" Malik looked at his mother. Renee nodded. "Yes, sir," Malik said. "I want to see everything." They climbed the stairs together. Yates walked slowly, letting Malik set the pace. When they reached the top and stepped into the cabin, Malik stopped. He stood in the doorway and looked down the aisle. The empty seats, the overhead bins, the narrow walkway. His body stiffened. His hand found his mother's and squeezed. Renee knelt beside him. "You are okay. This is a different plane, a different day, and there is no one here but us and Captain Yates." Malik looked at the aisle. He looked at the seats. He took one breath, then another. Then he let go of his mother's hand and took a step forward. "Captain Yates, where is the cockpit?" "Right this way, young man." They walked past the rows of empty seats. Malik did not look at row 14. Maybe he did not notice the number. Maybe he chose not to. But Renee noticed. She looked at it as they passed and felt something twist in her stomach. Then she kept walking, because that is what you do. You walk past the place where it happened, and you keep going. The cockpit door was open. Malik stepped through and stopped breathing for a second. Renee could see it, the complete and total awe that seized his entire body. The instrument panels, the switches, the throttle, the yoke, the windshield that looked out onto the runway and the sky beyond it. "Captain Yates, is this where you sit?" "Left seat. That is the captain's seat right there." "Can I sit in it?" "That is why we are here." Yates lifted Malik into the captain's seat. The boy's feet did not come close to reaching the rudder pedals. His hands barely wrapped around the yoke. But his face. His face was something Renee would remember for the rest of her life. The fear was gone. The confusion was gone. The pain was gone. What was left was the purest expression of joy she had seen on her son's face since his father was alive. "Mom, I am sitting in the captain's seat. I am sitting where the pilot sits. I see you, baby. I see you." "Captain Yates, what does this button do?" For the next 45 minutes, Captain Robert Yates explained every instrument, every gauge, every switch in that cockpit to a 7-year-old boy who absorbed it all like sunlight. He let Malik hold the yoke. He showed him how the flaps worked. He explained what the altimeter measured and what the artificial horizon displayed. He told Malik that the clouds were not made of cotton candy, but that when you flew through them, it felt like the whole world had wrapped you in a blanket. Malik laughed. Actually laughed. The sound of it filled the cockpit and spilled out into the empty cabin, and Renee pressed her hand over her mouth because the tears were coming, and she could not stop them, and she did not want Malik to see. When it was time to leave, Malik unbuckled from the captain's seat and stood up. He looked at Captain Yates with the most serious expression a 7-year-old face could make. "Captain Yates, I am going to be a pilot when I grow up. Not one day. When I grow up. That is different." Yates put his hand on Malik's shoulder. "I believe you, Malik, and when you get your wings, I want to be the first person you call." "I will. I promise." They walked off the plane together. At the bottom of the stairs, Malik turned around and looked up at the 737 one more time. "Mom, the sky is still mine, just like he said." Renee took his hand. "Yes, it is. Nobody can take that from you." 3 weeks after the incident, the airline formally reached out to Marcus Reed with a settlement proposal. Marcus reviewed it with Audrey Simmons and brought it to Renee. The financial terms were significant, enough to cover Malik's medical expenses, therapy, education, and then some. But Renee did not care about the number. She cared about what came with it. "What about the reforms?" she asked. Marcus laid out the airline's offer. They agreed to fund a comprehensive child passenger protection program, mandatory de-escalation training for all cabin crew, designed in partnership with child psychologists and trauma specialists, a transparent complaint tracking system that would flag repeat offenders and prevent them from continuing to work flights, and a program called Wings of Trust, specifically created for children who had been traumatized during air travel. Therapy, support, and personal experiences with pilots like Captain Yates to rebuild their relationship with flying. Renee read every line. She made Marcus read it again, out loud. She asked questions. She challenged language. She pushed back on timelines. She insisted that the program be independently monitored and publicly reported on annually. "I want accountability built into the structure, Marcus, not promises, mechanisms. If they fail to implement, I want consequences. We will include enforcement provisions, binding arbitration if they fall short, annual compliance audits by an independent third party. And Captain Yates, I want him involved, not as a figurehead, as a real part of this program. He reached my son when no one else could. I already spoke with him. He agreed before I finished the sentence. Renee signed the settlement on a Friday afternoon. She did not hold a press conference. She did not do interviews. She released a written statement through Marcus's office. My son Malik is healing. He is brave. He is resilient. He still loves airplanes. The settlement we have reached is not about money. It is about making sure that what happened to Malik never happens to another child. The reforms being implemented will protect millions of young passengers and their families. I want to thank every person who spoke up, who came forward, who shared their story, especially Patricia Holden and her daughter. Your courage gave us the evidence we needed to force real change. And I want to thank Captain Robert Yates, who reminded my son that the sky belongs to him. Malik wanted me to add one thing. He says thank you to everyone who sent him letters and drawings and toy airplanes. He read every single one. He wanted you to know that he's going to be a pilot when he grows up. Not one day, when he grows up. The statement was shared over 3 million times. Carol Whitman's criminal trial began 6 weeks later. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Monica Chen, presented a case built on video evidence, medical records, 19 witness testimonies from former passengers, and the complete record of Carol's personnel file from the airline. 4 prior complaints. A pattern of escalation, a documented history of aggressive behavior that was reported, recorded, and ignored. Carol's attorney, Glenn Forsyth, attempted to mount a defense based on workplace stress, inadequate training, and what he called a momentary lapse in judgment. He hired a psychologist who testified that Carol had been suffering from chronic occupational burnout and that her actions, while regrettable, were not premeditated. Monica Chen dismantled that defense in her cross-examination with one question. Doctor, does occupational burnout cause a person to fabricate a seat reassignment, escalate a confrontation with a seated mother and child, knock a toy out of a 7-year-old's hands, and then punch that child in the face with a closed fist? Is that burnout, or is that a choice? The psychologist had no answer. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 42 minutes. They returned a guilty verdict on all charges: aggravated assault on a minor, reckless endangerment, assault causing bodily harm to a child under 10. Carol stood motionless as the verdict was read. She did not cry. She did not collapse. She stared straight ahead with the same expression she had worn in the aisle of that airplane: controlled, hard, empty. Judge Eleanor Marsh scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was full again, every seat taken. Media in the gallery, members of Congress watching remotely. Patricia Holden sat in the third row with her daughter, now 15, who had written a victim impact statement that was read into the record. I was 9 years old when Carol Whitman grabbed my wrist and twisted it until I cried. I told my mother. My mother told the airline. The airline told us it was handled. It was not handled. 6 years later, she broke a little boy's nose. I am 15 now, and I still cannot get on an airplane. I still feel her hand on my wrist. I want the court to know that what she did to Malik, she would have kept doing to other children on other flights, because no one stopped her. No one listened. Please listen now. Renee submitted a written victim impact statement on behalf of Malik. She did not read it in court. Marcus read it for her. The final paragraph said this: My son asked me what he did wrong. He asked me that question on the worst day of his life, and I could not answer him. No parent should ever have to stand in front of their child and have no answer for why a stranger hurt them. Malik is healing. He is strong. He is brave. But he is 7 years old, and he should not have to be any of those things. He should just be a kid who loves airplanes. That is all he ever wanted to be. Judge Marsh sentenced Carol Whitman to 4 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 2.5 years. She was also ordered to pay restitution, complete a mandatory anger management program, and was permanently barred from any position involving passenger service, child supervision, or public safety. Carol was handcuffed and led out of the courtroom. As she passed through the gallery, she looked at Patricia Holden's daughter. The girl looked back at her. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She held Carol's gaze with a steadiness that belonged to someone far older than 15. Carol looked away first. Outside the courthouse, Marcus held a brief press conference. He thanked the prosecution. He thanked the jury. He thanked the witnesses who came forward. And he thanked Renee and Malik without naming specific details of their healing journey, because that was private and it belonged to them. A reporter asked, Mr. Reed, what do you want people to remember about this case? Marcus paused before answering. I want people to remember that this started because a 7-year-old boy sat in his seat on an airplane. That is all he did. He sat in his seat and held a toy and dreamed about clouds. And a woman who was supposed to keep him safe punched him in the face. I want people to remember that 4 complaints were filed before this happened, and nothing was done. I want people to remember that it took a teenager with a cell phone to expose what an entire industry system was designed to hide. And I want people to remember Malik's words. I just wanted to see the clouds, because that sentence should haunt every person in a position of authority who has ever looked the other way. 6 months later, the Wings of Trust program launched at 12 major airports across the United States. Captain Robert Yates led the Pilot Engagement Division. The program had already helped 43 children in its first quarter. Families reported that their children were able to fly again, some for the first time in years. Patricia Holden's daughter, who had refused to fly for 6 years, participated in the program that spring. Captain Yates walked her through the same 737 he had shown Malik. She sat in the cockpit. She touched the yoke. She cried. And then she booked a flight to Washington, D.C. She did not take the bus this time. Renee returned to work at the hospital 8 weeks after the incident. Her colleagues welcomed her back quietly, without fanfare, the way she preferred. She operated on a child with a facial fracture her first week back. Her hands were steady. Her focus was absolute. She saved that child's face the way she wished someone had protected her son's. Malik started second grade that fall. His teacher, who had followed the story closely, asked Renee before the first day if there was anything she should know. Renee said, "He is afraid of loud voices from adults he does not know. He flinches when someone moves quickly near his face, and he is the bravest boy I have ever met. Just let him be a kid." On the first day of school, Malik's class was asked to draw what they wanted to be when they grew up. Most kids drew firefighters, doctors, teachers, athletes. Malik drew a pilot standing in front of a 737. The pilot was smiling. The clouds around the airplane were drawn with extra detail, big and